Right, okay, so I think we're back on the mainstream of the Anthropos festival now. So just say again, we love Anthropos and it's the best festival ever. And next year we will be running those lectures and panels there in a special nice tent for a few hours a day. We'll have discussions and we'll just basically also hang out because that's awesome. You can hang out with my guests, they're awesome people. So we're going to start talking about mental health and psychedelics, but we're going to start a bit with the current mental health problems with the pandemic. And I'm going to invite two speakers first. Chloe, who is a psychiatrist, and also together with Natalie, they run Psychiatrics. Can you, while I invite the guests on screen, can you explain about
I'm just gonna write it in the thing. So it's like, oh, there she is.
Hello, hi.
So Psychiatrics is a YouTube channel that me, Chloe, and one of our other friends, Kirsty, is running. It's basically us three drinking and talking about mental health stuff. Quite frankly, we're quite straight talking psychiatrists. Probably not when you think of a psychiatrist, you probably don't think about us three, which is good. And we talk about, we pick topics, maybe they're relevant or, things that people come to us with a lot of issues with, and we just get into it, really.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Talk about the things that people struggle to talk about. That's the idea.
Yes, exactly.
Awesome. Like, look now, 4 women. This is great. Woohoo, big up for women. And our fourth guest who will come on screen about 20 minutes is also a woman. So very female today, very nice. But it's quite a breath of fresh air in mental health, isn't it, to see so many women. It's all male dominated. But anyways, let's just, I just want to introduce my other guest. So Chloe is a psychiatrist. She worked on MDMA studies for addiction. She worked on the Psilocybin studies as well. She's also working in drug science on cannabis related stuff. Amazing woman. And we have Ashley here. Ashley, give us a wave. Ashley also worked, she worked in Imperial College on psilocybin studies. I'm not going to talk a lot about what they do. I want them to kind of explain more themselves. So maybe we'll start with Chloe. Tell us more about you and what brings you to this panel.
Great, yeah.
Except for me.
Yeah, you of course. I know. So I'm a psychiatrist, and I'm currently working with the non-profit organisation Drug Science. So our aim really is to approach drug reform in an evidence-based way, and so in a way that isn't influenced by commercial or political agendas. And something I'm working on at the moment is a medical cannabis registry. So the idea of the project is, as patients are prescribed medical cannabis in this country, we're going to collect health outcome measures so we can see where it's helpful and where it's not so helpful. And hopefully we can present that to the regulatory bodies and hopefully get it available on the NHS for people who need it. So that's my project.
Awesome project. Yeah. Hope that happens soon. We need medicines. Ashley, tell us a bit more about you, what you do at Imperial, what was your role in the study?
Yeah, sure. So I've been working on the psilocybin for depression study, and I've been doing a lot of different roles on that study. So I'm an assistant psychologist, and so supporting with the guiding, so doing lots of guiding with participants going through the study, helping people when they first get in touch with the study to find out about what it's all about and going through the screening process with them. And then a big part of my work is also the aftercare. So helping people, so I'm a meditation teacher as well, so I support people to learn meditation afterwards, but actually aftercare has become something much bigger than just supporting people with meditation, because it's a huge topic, integration, and I think it goes on for a really long time afterwards, and people have such different experiences that they need very different things. So it's been fascinating to work on the study.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your beautiful introductions. We're still waiting for Natalie, but I believe she'll join us soon. Oh, there she is. Great timing. Great timing. Well, she was with us for 2 hours, so do excuse her. She needs to go to things like get water. So basically, ladies, We're in the midst of mental health crisis. On top of that, we get the pandemic. How does this affect mental health of people? 3, 2, 1, go.
I mean, I can certainly speak to that. I'm sure we
Go for it.
Oh my gosh. So there's actually some really interesting studies looking at mental health in quarantine, what happens when people are isolated, and all the sort of things you think would expect happen. People struggle to sleep, they get depressed, they get anxious. But what I'm particularly interested in at the moment is the increase in psychosis. So for anyone who doesn't know, that's when people lose touch with reality. And I think the current climate, there's so much uncertainty and there's so much anxiety. I mean, you look in the media and there's all these conflicting narratives going on, and no one can really plan for the future. We're all sort of stuck in this space of not knowing what's going on, what's going to happen, what does the future bring? And what we're seeing is this increase in psychosis. People are just losing touch with reality because no one really knows where we are, what's happening. It's concerning. I think it's a really difficult time for a lot of people.
Yes, just to direct point to what you just said, I got an email from someone I know recently who used to be quite the same person, and that person told me actually that they were kidnapped by government officials and tortured, and like everything that person wrote, like it just didn't make any sense. It was not coherent. It like literally sounded like someone mad is speaking. And this is, you think that this is like overboard happening everywhere? That
absolutely. And it's really difficult because we're seeing a lot of people saying things like, oh, that I feel like I've been infected with something, or the government are doing something to me, I feel controlled. And in a way, it is sort of true. That's the strange thing here. It's like, well, that there is this virus around and we are all being controlled. We are all being told what we can and cannot do. But then when it just
blur the lines, won't it?
Yeah, that there's lots of things that are going on that are really, really frightening. We have to all it's illegal to have a friend round now. When did that happen? We're very controlled by the state at the moment. And
you can't have sex if you don't live together or something like that.
You'll get arrested.
Oh my God.
Doesn't it make it all the more exciting though, hey? But yeah, that there is this, then it's just, a lot of people are just tipping over into what we call sort of pathological psychosis, where they're just going that little bit further, and it's a concern for sure.
Do you guys have anything to add, Ashley or Natalie?
I was going to say, just in work. So I work in liaison, which is when you do psychiatry in a regular hospital. You cover like A&E and stuff. So you see a lot of different things coming in. Obviously, people who've already got pre-existing mental health problems, whatever they are, they've been made a lot worse by this situation. You've got to remember, we're going through. So obviously the people who've got pre-existing problems and the people who, like you said, were sane before are now sort of moving into that area. We're going through a global collective trauma, and everyone's going to deal with it differently. So anxiety especially is through the roof, because we're having to deal with lots of uncertainty. So that's basically where anxiety is bred from, is uncertainty, the unknown. And like Chloe said, lots of mixed messages, lots of unknowing, lots of back to and throwing, not knowing what's going on. And as a society, we're not used to that. We haven't gone through wartime. We haven't had this level of uncertainty on this scale before. It's making people very anxious. People who've already got psychosis, so Chloe said people tipping into psychosis, but people who've already got psychosis, what we were seeing a lot in A&E was coronavirus and being infected and all that kind of stuff is being incorporated into their psychosis. So whether they was, usually their psychosis usually takes more of a religious flavor. Now it's becoming more about being infected, and it's sort of meshing with their illness that they already have. I think of people who've got germ phobia, people with OCD, and how now this is an unseen virus, and being clean and unclean, and how that can really make their mental health problems a lot worse. So And the other thing I would say is, especially from a psychiatry point of view, our patients also include people who are very vulnerable, so people who've got like learning difficulties, people with mental illness, who really rely on social contact for them to feel connected to the world. And now that's gone. That's gone. We are maybe doing video calls if they're tech savvy. You know, you've got some people who are so unwell they just can't use Zoom or whatever. So they're becoming very isolated, and that is just a breeding ground for, well, any mental health problem, really.
Actually, did you see any like effects on your study participants now that you do integration online and stuff? How is that on your side?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting, kind of, Natalie, talking about isolation and thinking about how much a part of people's experience of depression that is, and how at risk then that puts people for developing depression. And what I would say I've noticed, I think it's been quite a complex picture with the people with depression that I've been working with, actually. So the initial kind of phase of COVID starting, sorry, birds in the background. That's my territory. I'm in the canal. So in the beginning, when COVID first started, and lockdown first began, a lot of the clients that I was working with had this almost positive effect, because it was like all of the social pressure that they usually feel under to participate in life, but they and even for the people with depression where they wanted to be able to do that, just that loss of drive to be able to do it, and just being completely unable to, that pressure in a way was lifted. For lots of people, they started to they said that it was almost a relief for a period of time, which was quite interesting, and I think really points to the kind of social issues that are involved in mental health, and I think can be forgotten. We kind of think about mental health problems being, well, I guess in a biomedical model inside the person, that there's something wrong with the person. Actually, there's so much more going on. There's so many more factors, and I think this really highlights.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have been talking about like the magnifying effect, like with like psychedelics being magnifying, and COVID almost having this magnifying effect. And so for the people whose lives were quite good before, and their kind of social and psychological and emotional health was okay, they're kind of doing okay. But for the people that have any kind of difficulties in any of those areas, it's really made it.
Really highlighted it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, just that now I think that with the people that I'm working with depression, it's very up and down. So whilst that kind of initial relief is there, and in some senses it's still there, and does make me think a lot about how, like, if we just change the way that we think about it and change the way that we, help people understand what they're experiencing, that might have a massive impact. But also, but then the isolation is really compounded, and of course that has a huge effect. So although they have like a tolerability to be able to deal with it in a way, I think, better than some people right now, it's still incredibly difficult. And a lot of people are talking about physical touch, the loss of physical touch, which I think is so important.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Good practice, hug yourselves. 10 minutes like this, oxytocin levels go up. It's very important, self-care. And if this doesn't work for you, holding your face, so good. It's so healthy to touch yourself this way and give self-love to yourself, right?
Yeah, I love that myself.
Oh, it's great. So I'm thinking, so we have this situation now. It's not great. Some people are coping, some are coping worse. What will be the aftermath? Like, let's say pandemic is kind of finished. Like, are we more traumatized because of the pandemic? Are we going to be? Sorry.
I think that there could be an opportunity for change here, for sure.
I already hope so.
Yeah, I think what happens now, what will happen after, still depends on how we all deal with it in the now, and whether we go back to certain unhealthy things that were going on before. It's certainly one of the things that I've noticed. I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but because the economy stalled, there's a lot more creativity coming out. I've noticed a lot of people are finding their voices. They're speaking more. People are focusing more on things like art and music, because the economy has just kind of stopped for a bit, hasn't it? And I think that's beautiful, and I really hope that's something that we carry on with. Yes, I think it depends on
that busyness is gone. It's forced us to become still.
Yeah.
And reevaluate and self-reflect. And like you said, people becoming creative. They're reevaluating their lives, thinking what's important to them. Quite a lot of people are in jobs, and I know some people have been thinking about their career choice, and they're not a key worker, and what does that mean? And should I be living a more fulfilling life? And I think if it took a pandemic, but it stopped our sort of capitalist machine and got people to stop and think, that's always a good thing.
Exactly.
I think in terms of sort of like specifically mental health problems that are coming out of this, I think once we get back to normal, some of those things, because the stress is then removed, quite a lot of people will sort of ease back to normal. There will be a cohort of people who maybe this was like their final trigger, and maybe they'll need to seek help after that. I think on a, like Chloe said, on a more of a global or national scale, I really hope it is a wheel for change. And we don't have to go and work a really busy 9 to 5 and rush around and pollute the earth. And we've shown we don't have to do that. Maybe we can do 4-day weeks and work from home. I mean, the Scandinavians are doing all right.
Yeah.
Let's be positive out of this, please.
To be honest, since this pandemic started, my life didn't change that much because I work a lot from home anyways.
Lucky.
But what I did, yes, but what did change is that I'm really hardcore on my weekends now. It's like no weekend work. Whole weekend is in the garden with my partner, like cleaning the house, whatever, but it's not computer. And I started doing Say on Monday. And what I'm aiming at is like now I work 4 days a week, and my productivity is the same. I'm still doing the same amount of work, and I'm probably doing it better because I'm like on it.
They've shown this. They've shown this in studies. Like
yeah.
They have the same. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, we actually work about 1 hour a day, don't we, out of the 8 hours?
I'm on my phone.
Exactly. So at the moment, because of the pandemic, that's maybe straight to Ashley here. The psychedelic research is on hold right now. What does this pandemic mean to actually your studies and moving forward in learning about psychedelics?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, it just came like a bulldozer through the study, really. Like everything else, we were so lucky at Imperial, where we were in the study. We only had 3 participants to complete all of the participants that were going to be coming through the study. So we actually managed to just about finish, and we were incredibly lucky with that. So that means for us, we can look at that data. We'll be able to produce those results and publish that and let people know about that. So we're really lucky that can carry on. But for other studies, I think, yeah, I mean, if you think about what a psychedelic therapy session involves, it involves usually 2 guides and a participant. So that's 3 people already. So you've got to be able to have 3 people together at least.
In a room together. And for us, for example, participants were traveling from all over the city. Sorry, not just the city, the country. And I think that's probably the case in many sites that are doing research. And then you have physical touch. There's physical touch, and it's a really important part of it for grounding and supporting, because it's so unpredictable. We never know what's going to happen, and it's such a big part of it. So it's really problematic for trying to run the studies at the moment, and at the moment all of ours are on hold, and there is no plan to start back up right now. So we're still waiting to get to a point where some of those things can come back. I mean, we did talk about crazy things like, could you do a Zoom session? Could you, can you do it with just one guide? And you can do it with just one guide, for example. That would be okay. Well,
I'm aware that there have been, I think some ketamine therapy has moved online.
Has it?
Yeah, and I've heard it's pretty trippy. Yeah.
How's it going? What have they said about it?
Well, I've heard that having the therapist on the screen whilst on ketamine is quite confusing.
It is.
I can imagine. Not that I ever tried ketamine, but I can imagine from what I heard.
I think something is really lost, isn't it? When you're not, having a therapist on a screen in an altered state.
Maybe psychedelic therapy is such a human therapy. It's so real and really about connection, human connection. And whilst the aftercare has really been possible to do online, I just don't know about it.
I don't.
So now we're not doing any psychedelic therapy online. Everybody should hear that. It's not good. But what I want to ask you next is, soon I'm going to also invite another guest on screen. Marta, get ready, but just in a minute. So do you think that now, after the pandemic and what's happening now, after we get back to normal, is the call for psychedelics to be medicalized even stronger now? Because are we going to need them to shift all this anxiety and trauma after the pandemic?
I mean, I think some of it will dissipate itself. I don't think we're going to finish this pandemic and everyone's going to be forever. I think it'll be, a natural, when we get back to normal, when that stress, that acute, what we're in right now, when that acute stress is gone, then people will be able to sort of normalize to a point. So I'm not expecting there's going to be droves of people coming in with severe anxiety.
I'm aware that regulatory bodies are pushing for it because they recognise there's going to be a mental health pandemic next. One of the things I found with the cannabis research we're doing is they became very supportive of it when the pandemic hit. A lot of the barriers that we were facing, they just said, just do it what you need to do to get people well, to keep people well. And we're getting the same sort of messages about psychedelics. What can we do to help? Can we deschedule them? Which is just amazing. It's a shame it took a pandemic for that to happen, but
I'm thinking too.
All the problems, didn't it?
You got to say that again, huh?
The pandemic highlighted all the problems.
Yeah, and suddenly they think, oh my gosh, there's all these problems, there's all these mental health difficulties. We need to do something. What can we do to help? So it's good.
Finally, exactly, because shops are closed, so people finally think about proper stuff. I'm just also thinking we're having the racial justice kind of panel before, and Chloe, you were listening, and also brings to mind that maybe this is why this is the moment to speak about this, because people's eyes are not on the bags and shops and clothes and all this stuff all the time, and trying to buy to things to heal their depressions and stuff. Instead, they can look in and out and see what's happening actually. So what I did notice though is I think personally that after this, there's going to be massive kind of wave of people wanting to go to psychedelic retreats. I'm sure it's going to happen. They're not happening now, so people are waiting. But also what I want to talk about now is people think that maybe tripping at home now is a good idea. And, people have severe anxieties, depression, but they know about those drugs and they're like, oh, they're helping people. So maybe I should take it on my own, So I just wanted to know, first of all, Chloe, because I think you had some stats on are people actually tripping more and doing drugs in general? What is the current status?
Yeah, gosh, I haven't actually got the statistics to hand, but have you got them?
Go for it.
No, go on, Chloe, what are you going to say?
No, go for it.
Okay, so I had a little look at some, because not all of them are published. So there's this massive trans-European one that's got hundreds of thousands of people. It's not been published, so I can only really talk about the ones that have been published. So there's a CREW study, which is a Scottish study, which shows just a 58% rate increase in reported just general drug use. People are attributing it to boredom, stress, isolation, and just having more time to do it. There's a the organization Drugs and Me. Their survey said that people are using cannabis and benzos more during the pandemic, but less cocaine, MDMA, and ketamine.
Is that the supply problem, though?
Probably a supply problem. Well, I guess cannabis and benzos are what you would want to take if you're quite anxious.
Yeah.
And whereas MDMA and cocaine may be a bit more party-ish, social,
Yeah.
So yes, like I said, there's an ongoing by the GDS, the Global Drug Survey. So that's got 48,000 respondents, but that's still in progress. But those are the ones that I've looked at.
So I understand taking benzos, cannabis, because this is all like calming you down, blah, blah, right? But like, yeah, to go back to, is it a good idea to trip now? Any takers for this question?
I think with any it's all about setting, isn't it? You've got to, I don't know if you've never taken psychedelics before and you're in a pandemic and you're at home on your own and you're stressed, is a good time to start. I think that would be a very bad idea, because if we know what we mean by setting. If you're on your own and you're already struggling, I don't think that would be a good idea at all.
Yeah.
I mean, different situations, different.
Without a guide, that's what you're without a guide. And maybe I will ask Ashley here to speak the importance of a guide, actually. And after that, I want to invite Marta on the screen. So Natalie, because you were with me for last long time, I'll give you a few minutes break, but please don't tune out. I will take you back on screen, so stay with us. And now we can have a bit of a tea break. Bye. So Ashley, just let us know the importance of a guide during psychedelic trips.
Yeah, so someone was asking me about this yesterday, and they're very experienced with psychedelics. So I think it really depends. I think if somebody has a lot of experience using them and does it on their own a lot and already has experience doing that, then they know that works for them. But I think anybody who's thinking about doing it for the first time, a guide is, essential, really. It would be just such a huge support, because it's somebody who, you're entering into an experience where you don't know what's going to happen. It's inherently unpredictable, and it can be really intense in lots of different ways. And a guide is somebody who's really comfortable with that space and who is really confident that at the end of that trip, you're coming right back to where you were. And like Natalie's just gone to have a cup of tea, we're all going to have a cup of tea and a chat about what's happened, and everything's okay. So it's a really calming, soothing presence for you, who isn't trying to direct your experience in any way, but just is there to let you know everything's all right all the way through it, so that you can have that sense of inner safety, so you can really drop deeply into where you're going. So if you're using psychedelics in a therapeutic way, I think that sense of safety is what allows us to let go and to really go into what's difficult for us. Those things that in everyday life we don't deal with because it's too much, or it's too far in the past, or it's been too difficult. And I think, having the kind of support to be able to do that is really important. So I think that's what a guide does, really.
I think so, yes. I have Marta here. I'm not sure if you can hear us, Marta. Is everything? Yes, you're connected now.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, your video.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear your video is disappearing sometimes, but that's okay as long as we hear you. It's like notoriously bad connections on Crowdcast. It keeps happening. Marta is a psychedelic guide and sitter. She works at synthesis retreats. So those are commercial retreats, not the medical studies. And Marta, can you just explain a bit more about your research and what you're interested in regards to psychedelic experience?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm not a mental health professional, neither medical professional, but I have a degree in cognitive science, and I did a lot of research on psychedelics in terms of how they act on brain, but also on the nervous system. I also work for longevity companies, so I did a lot of research on epigenetics, on genetics, So kind of I'm trying to have like a grasp of the psychedelic experience in its totality, like not only how it affects the mental health, but also physical health and social interactions. And there's limited information about that, but also like how it affects our genes and how we can use them for optimizing our health, like general well-being.
Brilliant. And that leads me to first question. Sorry. Is there anything more?
Yeah. So just to add, like, I guess I work for the Synthesis Retreat. I'm an assistant facilitator there, like I couldn't hear what you said, Ashley. And by the way, like it's great to be on panel with all of you. It's thank you for having me, and great to see you. Be here with wonderful ladies. So yeah, I couldn't hear what you said because I was connecting to the system, Ashley. But one point is that I can say from the perspective of synthesis and what we do in terms of like decision on who will be our participant. We have really extensive screening process. So like a lot of people do not realize that there's so many contraindications to taking psychedelics, and we work really closely with medical professionals, and there's so many risks. You take unrelated like cardio, some medication for your like cardio systems or for your thyroid or something like that, and it can influence your experience in ways you cannot predict. So there's so much more to like tripping on your own and the safety of it.
Can you tell us a bit more about, what emergencies can come and why is it actually crucial to have a sitter when you're like a beginner? Why is it not a good idea to now take psilocybin and heal your depression when you're a newbie?
Yeah, so from my perspective, what I can say is that psychedelics are sympathomimetic, which means they amplify coping strategies and they amplify responses of the nervous system that's responsible for stress reactions. So you can end up being really agitated, and then depending on how you deal with this, you might either end up with high anxiety, even panic attack. Sometimes those panic attacks can lead to shutdowns. So like the second nervous system overtaking and putting a brake on the alert nervous system. So you can dysregulate. You can actually dysregulate nervous system, and there are cases, especially with stronger psychedelics, that people end up with dysregulated nervous system. Not only with the mental problems, but I think either Chloe or you actually could talk more about the possible mental side effects of tripping on your own.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly, yes, don't think it's advisable, especially at the moment. And I guess people are, is it more illegal to have someone around your house, or has that changed now? Is that legal from today?
I lost the track of UK policies to pandemic. Sorry, Boris, you're not doing a great job.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, I think it's still illegal to have someone around your house. So I guess it's difficult to get a trip sitter, and things can go wrong. Things can go wrong. Even though psychedelics tend to be physically pretty safe, that there are times when it isn't. And maybe Ashley, you could say more about this, but in studies, we do things like blood tests, we check blood pressure, we monitor heart rate, lots of extra things that we do to make sure people are physically well. If you're on your own, there's not going to be anybody to call an ambulance if something does go wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think also if we think about the after effects, like it's the same. Yeah, absolutely, Chloe. Like coming into studies, and master actually, yeah, we're coming into studies. People we're screening for physical health, but we're also screening for psychological health, and actually, yeah, you know, is somebody in a position in their life? You know, it might be that they are psychologically healthy at another time, but is this particular time in their life the right moment to do it as well? I think that's important to think about. It's not just about the kind of psychological state, but also the state that we are in as a collective right now. It's very, very challenging for us. And in terms of if we think about then the experience itself, things could go wrong, but then also in the aftermath, you know, people are integrating, the experiences are huge, and then you've got the weeks afterwards. And people are often very up and down. You know, it can be quite turbulent those weeks after in integrating those experiences. And of course, that's where the richness of psychedelics really is. That's where you can really bring the insights into life and make changes. But if we're in this context and you can't go and do maybe some of the things that you would do, and you know, what if you get sick? What if actually you contract COVID during that time? So you're in this kind of expanded psychological or emotional state, and then you become physically very unwell, and maybe somebody can't come and help you. You know, I think there's a lot of kind of practicalities also to think about at a time like this.
Yeah, you can't just call up your friend and ask them to come around. I'm sure you are doing that, but it's harder at the moment. You can't just get your mates around.
Yeah, and it's not the same to be on the phone or on the screen, as you already said. Trying imagine ketamine studies with a therapist on screen, that would be just so weird.
Can I just quickly
Sure.
add one more thing also? Because like I know like there are lots of people who have a lot of experience with psychedelics, and they think like, oh, I'm so experienced, doesn't matter. And they think they can take psychedelics now because they know what's going on. But you never know how the situation is affecting you. Maybe the social isolation actually got you more affected than you think. And then you take psychedelics, and suddenly it turns out after tripping 50 times or something, you cannot handle it, and you're on your own. So I would advise caution, even if you're
And is
super
this like a
experienced.
danger of re-traumatization then? Can you speak about dangers of re-traumatization while you trip alone, and also while you go to like not very legit retreats that don't have very good practices? Is that a common thing that people get re-traumatized?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think Chloe and Ashley are probably more experienced, and like their background is more suited to talk about this. I can only say that I look at the psychedelic experience and in mental health from perspective of polyvagal theory. So like assuming that we feel the best in a social engagement situation. So when we feel supported, we feel part of the group, we feel safe then. And anything that gets us out of that social engagement situation where we feel endangered, then it leads us to stress. So any situation that would even like amplify, and some psychedelics can amplify, and then they open us to brain plasticity. So it's like a very vulnerable open state, and if something happens, then there's, in my opinion, there's a risk of re-traumatization.
Chloe, do you have any thoughts about it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've certainly heard anecdotal reports of people coming away from underground retreats, re-traumatized, that they have practices that retreats where there are obvious power imbalances, that they've been set up purely to make money, that they're not safe spaces. I've heard stories, and I've seen people coming into the psychiatric services after these events, so then having to come into kind of mainstream mental health services, having tried psychedelic experience to treat their mental health problems, and actually it hasn't gone well. Not the fault of the substance, the fault of the setup, the fault of the people running these underground retreats with not much experience, that purely exist I guess for profit, and it's really sad. It's really sad.
Yes. You know, actually, I mean, Ross is not with us here, but Ross is running the integration group, and Rosalind Watts, and she told me that there's loads of kind of re-traumatized people after their 5-MeO DMT experiences, and that people have flashbacks from the trip during their life. Yeah, did you at all in your life meeting psychonauts have seen this happening? The re-traumatization thing.
Yeah, I think when you talk about re-traumatization, I think what really comes to mind for me is so one of the main criticisms, if you like thinking kind of psychoanalytically about psychedelics, is that they might overwhelm the defenses too quickly. So it might overwhelm people's psychological defenses too quickly, and they don't have the inner resources to cope with integrating the material that comes up. And I think that's a real risk. And I think that's why preparation as well as integration is so important. And it's why doing it with a guide and having somebody to support you through that who's trained how to do that properly and thinking about those things is really, really important, because actually these experiences can be too much for people to integrate. And I think it's important that we think about that. The other thing that I think is that for me, it was a surprise for me to really realize, but there is, I think in clinical trials, there's a risk of re-traumatization because of the way that we have to provide care is this very short term in have your experiences and then out. And we're obviously on the study, we're trying to remedy that and we're trying to provide longer term aftercare, but actually it's such an intense bonding experience with the guide that people become very, very attached, which is great. That's what we want. That's how therapy works. That's wonderful. And people can get a lot of benefit. But if they're people, when we're working with people with severe depression, they're often people who've had a lot of early life trauma and they've had experiences of not having good enough care. And I think we can replicate that in the way that we design studies if we don't think about this longer term supporting people and actually connecting them up to each other afterwards and maintaining some kind of support in the transition so that people aren't just kind of, dropped after the study and that their experiences are really supported.
That's a really interesting point you raise, Ashley. That really kind of speaks to me.
Yeah.
And I know. Was it Rick Strassman's study, the DMT study? Did a lot of the participants said, "How am I ever supposed to speak about this? How do I go back into society, my family and friends, and talk about what's happened?" And that in itself causes a disconnection. Suddenly, you've had this mind-blowing experience, and you don't know how to talk about it, and people look at you as if you're strange, or I don't like to use the word psychotic, but people can feel very isolated with that. I think that can be a worry with studies, especially when you're using psychedelic naive patients, people who've never taken a psychedelic before. They don't have friends and family who know anything about them, and they come out the study and they say, "Oh, I had all these strange experiences." And they get quite an odd look back, and then they never speak about it again.
That's true. It's not very accepted to talk about trauma and depression and mental health in general in our society, I feel. Yeah. So talking about then psychedelics on top of that is like, whoa, too much, too quick. But yeah, I want to stress the importance of community, and just thinking, I had a friend who unfortunately died recently, and the story of this man is that he had a heroin addiction, and he went for Iboga retreat to Mexico, which costed loads of money, £5,000 or something. And he came back and he really said that this was really helpful for him. And he was like this new man. But then very quickly he falls into his old community and old patterns and the same friends and the drug abuse again. And he went back there very quickly, and unfortunately he died a few months ago. He's not with us anymore, which is a tragic for his family, his friends, because he was a golden person. So that makes me, and then again, I see a lot of people coming from psychedelic retreats and studies who come to us, to Psychedelic Society, and they're really scared, and they suddenly meet people to talk to about their experiences, and they can contextualize. And I see them months later, and they start looking healthier and healthier and more confident. So just that community aspect. So the question, I suppose, is here: how do we see the support system? What support system do we actually need to have in place to properly support someone after the experience? Maybe to Ashley, because you're a integration specialist here.
God, I think we've got so much to learn about integration. I think it's unique to each person. I think that's the place to start, that we need to think about that each person will need something individually. But yeah, I think you're so right, Anya, like the community is just so important. I think for us on the study, connecting people to each other has been probably the most important thing that we've done in terms of aftercare. And actually, this was a positive thing to come out of COVID, because we hadn't connected people via Zoom. We had an in-person integration group, and we had a WhatsApp group, but the WhatsApp group didn't really work. It kind of was like a flurry of activity when a new person joined, and then it would kind of die away a little bit. But now we have like a weekly Zoom call with anyone from the study that wants to be part of it, and it's like their own kind of integration group. And it's amazing, and they're all and that's been enough to kind of really facilitate connections between the people in the study, and they have the shared experience. I really strongly think the thing that has pained me the most through the study is that experience of them going back into isolation. I think there are lots of tools that people can learn, like meditation. A lot of people have taken up meditation. That's been incredibly important. Some people have gone on to do therapy afterwards, and I think that's been really key for some people. I think therapy, probably I would recommend it on the whole for anyone who's interested in doing it and who wants to keep kind of moving on their recovery journey. And also people have opened up into all beyond meditation, kind of other types of alternative health practices, and I think that's been also fantastic. But all of that works on the individual, and I think none of that alone is enough to really support someone if you don't have community as well. But if you have community and you don't have as, I think it would have a bigger impact. I think community will have a bigger impact than each of those individual kind of practices, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And also the community encourages the practices as well, because you would already have people who went through their healing, or they're going through it, and they're practicing those things, so they'll teach you. You're naturally going to get dragged in.
Yeah,
it's like a virus. Chloe or Marta, do you have anything to add to this integration? What systems do we need to really support people to integrate their psychedelic journeys?
I love what Ashley's just said about the Zoom call and the WhatsApp group. It's lovely. I think community, it's social inclusion is so important. I think social exclusion is really underseen in the mental health world. We overlook it all the time as if it's not that big a deal. But when you're socially excluded, when you don't have people around you, when you can't speak, when your reality is denied, it's awful. It's akin to a psychological death. It's, when you can't connect with other people, when you can't speak, and when you can't be heard, it's awful. So community is so important. I love what Ashley was saying.
Yeah, I agree. Marta, anything to add?
I love, Anya, that you brought up the addiction to the topic. I feel like when we look at the AA, they actually built like a very strong community. So the idea is like a person goes through rehab, and then they come back and they need to attend those meetings, and they have a kind of like a protege, so like a person that like looks after you for a year or something like that. So there's like a very
sponsor
strong,
it's called, I think.
It's sponsor. So you have someone, you feel like you're constantly you're supported by someone, and a lot of people who are in AA, they're very like they have a lot of problems with trust and with knowing how to connect. So it's kind of like a both support group, but also like a group that teaches you how to communicate in a better way and how to be more vulnerable. I would just add that like that model is great for me. Probably adding a bit of like more health conscious elements. So like adding some yoga and like how to look after yourself in more like a wholesome way, like dieting and stuff like that, because that also might be a problem. You might have the support of the group, but our bodies are in homeostasis, and if you had a better diet, then your neurotransmitters or hormones or something like that, they are actually pulling you back a little bit because your energy levels will be low. And once we don't feel well, we don't feel 100%, we don't feel the need to connect that much. So there's a tendency to withdraw a little bit. So kind of like looking at this from like a systems perspective, but like definitely the social and community element is the most crucial.
This is, I think, good moment just to say and like just acknowledge there's lots of people who have depression and they're vegan. And vegan diet is very hard to sustain. You can do it, but you need to be really militant about what you eat. So is it like when you're vegan and you don't have all the nutrients because you don't have time to cook properly and stuff, this is worsening your condition, isn't it? Basically, because you're tired all the time, you're more depressed, isn't it?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, there's a possibility. There are ways, like there are people who are biohacking vegans, for example, and they take enzymes, they take lots of supplements. There are substances like choline, for example, or vitamin B12 or iron that are very difficult to get from vegan diet, and they affect the way, like your energy levels in a big way. So yeah, definitely there's a possibility of this, but doesn't also like mean that vegan diet on its own it's bad. There are other diets also, like diets is a massive topic. Like you could be eating the best diet, but maybe if it's not suited to your genetics, you might be actually doing more harm to yourself, or you might not be aware of allergies. So kind of, yeah, like trying to get all of this, okay, like, okay, it's really difficult. That's why we should be working with professionals. In the ideal world, like in the ideal world, every person should have access to like a nutritionist and yeah, like a person that would tell you like what's your genetics and all that stuff. What people can do now is just like trying to cut down on processed food and sugar and try to keep as like yeah, as simple as possible. So like vegetables and yeah, simple dairy products.
Thank you. We just quickly to break this chapter of our conversation. It's almost 3, which means in 5 minutes we'll be off Anthropos mainstream. So just want to say again, those 4 ladies will be in Anthropos in 2021 with me. They'll be giving talks, panels, they'll be chatting to you, and they will be partying with us, and they're awesome. So yeah, maybe just before we go into our last hour, Chloe, you were in Anthropos last year. What did you think?
Oh my
Was
god,
it good for your mental health? That's the question.
It was the best. It was probably my favorite festival of the season. I go to a lot of festivals. It was beautiful. The setting was absolutely beautiful. The people were amazing, and there was just so much interesting stuff going on. I did some good laughter yoga. That was great. I had a great time doing that. It was brilliant. Amazing.
And Marta, what were your thoughts about Anthropos last year?
I really loved it too. I'm a massive bass music fan, so I'm super happy that this music is coming to Europe because it's not a very popular music in Europe. And yeah, I loved it. It was a small festival. It had like the family vibe. It was great.
Beautiful. So beautiful.
It was my favorite too. It was small, lovely in the forest. So to anybody who's still watching us, if you want to keep being tuned into this conversation, the mods of the chat will post a link to Crowdcast, the platform on which we're actually talking, and you can follow us for another hour. And to everyone who's going to stay on the mainstream now, enjoy the music and remember to dance. Dancing is very healthy for your mental health. And Marta can say that because it's what stimulates the vagus nerve, does it? Or doesn't it?
Yeah, it does stimulate. Singing and dancing, yeah, definitely yoga, all the movements, great for you.
Brilliant. So before I go to the next question and invite Akuya, I want to run last question to all of you. And I suppose I want to start with Chloe because you will go off the screen first, Chloe, but stay with us as usual.
Yeah.
So what are the good ways to keep sane at the moment?
That's a great
Your
question.
tips.
Oh my gosh. Mental health always starts with the building blocks. So eating well, sleeping well, exercise, and having a safe space to be, which I guess for some people might be difficult at the moment if there's abusive relationships or difficult dynamics and they're stuck in the home. But mental health always starts with those building blocks. And then it's about remembering the things that are meaningful and enjoyable to you. So, for me, my friends are very, very important to me. I'm making sure I'm checking in with my friends. I'm having Zoom calls. I'm making phone calls. And also just finding mindful activities. So I play a lot of board games. I do a lot of puzzles. Reading a lot of books. I'm making myself sound really interesting and exciting here, aren't I?
You run a YouTube channel?
Yeah, I run a YouTube channel. You can go check out my YouTube channel. It's social connect, having the building blocks in place first. So looking after your health with sleep and food, but then also remember to connect. And if you're not feeling okay, that's okay. It's okay to say you're not okay. It's okay to reach out and speak to people and say, actually, I'm finding this really difficult. It's a really difficult time for everybody. That lots of people are losing their jobs. People are having family members that are unwell. Everyone's frightened of becoming unwell themselves. So talk about it and let people know how you feel. And we're all in this suffering together. So let's all kind of be in it together and talk about it, help each other out. Yes.
Great psychiatric advice there for you all. I just have a little note, guys, to tell you that we've been getting a lot of love on the chat of the Anthropos mainstream. So it's very nice. Thank you, people who are still listening to us for last minute. So it's a good time to say goodbye to the Anthropos people. We love you. We'll see you next year. But kindly, I'm going to invite Akuya. So Chloe, I'll see you soon. And I'll drop that question to Ashley now. What do you do to keep sane now? You yourself, and what are your tips to others?
Me, myself, I've decided, like all the other people in COVID times that can get a puppy, to get a puppy. I'm obsessed with animals, so I'm doing things like feeding the birds because all the birds have had babies. So there's loads of ducklings and baby coots and cygnets all over the canal where I live. And so I'm doing lots of feeding them. I think it's just to echo what Chloe said. There are the things that are unique to us that we enjoy doing, and just to try and find those little things that we can do during this time and do those. I think it's easier or harder depending on our personalities as well. Like for me, quiet time is a bit easier, I think. So I can kind of enjoy that a bit. But I really need people. So I've had a lot of people time, as much people time as I can get, either in real life or speaking on Zoom. I think what Chloe said is the best advice, which is to be honest about our feelings and tell each other. Hi,
we got Akuya here. Sorry, brief technical issues. Screens are disappearing. It's very psychedelic. We're all here. So before I get to introduce Akuya, I'll let Ashley finish this point.
That's it. I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I know you do morning running, right, Ashley? I know you do running in the morning.
I do running. Yeah, running helps me a lot too. Yeah.
Good stuff. So just before. So yes, Akuya, I have a feedback, Akuya. Do you mind putting headphones on?
Oh.
let me try. Let's hope they will work in this one. You've got feedback. There's nothing.
I'm gonna mute you until you get headphones, because I can hear myself. So maybe I'll jump, while you find headphones, I'll jump to Marta and just ask, what are your tips to keeping sane right now?
Well, I think the most important is just to keep healthy. And what they're like, it's sometimes when you think about like, how do I make myself more healthy? It's such a massive topic, and the easiest thing you can do is just make sure that you get enough sleep. So like, just listen to your body when you're tired and just get enough sleep. There's a kind of like a role, if you need the alarm clock to wake up, that there's a high chance that you're sleep deprived. So like, looking into ways of catching up on sleep and then regulating your sleep enough so you can actually have like a regular schedule and you nearly wake up without alarm clock. And then, yeah, looking into diet. I do intermittent fasting, for example. It's not good for everyone, but for me, it works really well because it regulates how I feel, like my energy levels leveled up during the day. And I feel like when I feel energetically okay, I'm in a good mood, I'm more motivated to do things, I'm more calm, and I feel much kind of empowered to do things and like to face the challenges. So yeah, I do also like a yoga. So everything kind of like to make me feel well in terms of like my mood and physical well-being. It does help me to like cope with the stresses also.
You do also morning jumps, right? It's 10 jumps every morning or 30. Yeah. I stayed with Marta and she was above my head. And I could like, what is this? And I said to her, your neighbors are making weird noises, man. And she's like, no, it's me. So what I do jumping is good. Do 10 jumps, guys.
And, yes, I play some bass music and I do some and do jumping to it.
Well, I dance around the house and I stay in the garden, for example. But dancing in the house is just like great. Akuya, so welcome here. I'm gonna unmute you now. So Akuya is a speaker, writer, filmmaker, fashion designer, radio presenter, mother, friend, woman, and all those other things. So tell us, first of all, what interests you in this psychedelic space, and how do you keep yourself sane right now?
Hi everybody. Great show so far. Really enjoyed it. So what interests me in the psychedelic space is really the potential to heal and to heal quickly. That's always been my interest. The prospect of sitting, on somebody's couch for 7 years was just way too long, because over that 7 years you're still building up stuff. So then that looks like forever. Even with the work with psychedelics, it's not like you do it once and then it's never again. It's just that you can get to, I found anyway, you can get to places that you didn't even know that was somewhere you needed to go. They have an intelligence, and that for me is the thing that I found very, very attractive. And then how I've kept sane during this period of time. So earlier on, when the ladies were speaking, I recognized myself in what they were describing, the people who felt the weight had been lifted off their shoulders once there was the start of this, I call it a global retreat because I don't want to use any of the other terms. And also I want to just be a bit more honest about how I felt during this time. It's been so liberating. I mean, if all the things that I've gained during this time, if somebody had said, I can offer you all of this, I probably would have given them all the money I had. It's been absolutely brilliant to just be in, not have any kind of pending orders, not have people on the phone, to explore my creativity again, and discover things that have been hiding in places, and starting working with them again. It's invaluable. I want to institute it into my life. I want to take 3 months off every year. I don't know if I can, but I would like to try.
Thank you. I agree as well. I felt similar to you, Akuya, that when it all happened, I was like, oh, I don't have to do all those things I signed up to do this year.
Yeah.
Because we have this tendency to get busy all the time and be in motion. And it really kind of was like, no, look inside now. Maybe start the therapy. That's what I did, for example. I started therapy, and I think it was really, really great moment to start, because otherwise I wouldn't have time to take a whole Monday off to process and feel really shit about myself sometimes in order to feel better later. So you say you were not affected negatively at all, or did you have any negative effect of this pandemic on your sanity, Akuya?
Only 2 weeks ago, when what happened with George Floyd. I was doing really, really well. I was writing a new workshop. The idea kind of born from the talk that I did at Breaking Convention, and I was spending a lot of time researching, talking to people, and I was actually writing a whole thing about being triggered and how the machine triggers Black and brown people. And then when it started following what I'd written, I actually was sitting there feeling quite smug, because I'd written that it starts in writing, and then you start seeing pictures of Black bodies being handled, and then it finishes with a death. So I was expecting it. I knew it would happen, because everything else had played out a few weeks before. But the shock of it was actually so massive. I was really, really stunned. It took 5 whole days to come back to where I was before. And that really surprised me, because I was expecting on it. I've been working on myself, working on triggers, working on trauma, all of this sort of stuff. So it was really interesting to just see how these things work, and also to be in this enclosed space, I think changed the dynamic, because then I realized it was all so much about things being in your head and being in my body. It took it all to a very kind of different space. But then the other side is, thank goodness, in a way, that we have still been indoors, because actually the processing of it, this was the best place, rather than kind of having to be rushing around in normal kind of life. So I suppose in all things, you just have to give thanks, really, isn't it? Because you can learn something.
Yes. So do you think, I'm just like following on about what you said, do you think that after George Floyd, it must have been like a wave of more anxiety around Black community, obviously, and like mental problems. Did you see around your friends and community that people were triggered more?
Yeah, I think it was really interesting. It was really interesting kind of going on Facebook and Instagram, because that's where everybody was processing stuff, and then on WhatsApp, and having to, I've got a thing on my WhatsApp anyway that kind of like says, please don't send me horrible pictures and stuff, but people do anyway. They don't even take any notice. But what I could see was just all of the different types of outpourings. So there was anger, there was even more re-traumatizing images coming out. So people went back to history and were digging out kind of, really horrible pictures of things that had happened to Black bodies, and throwing that out there as well. It was every type of reaction was coming: numbness, anger, anxiety, fear, everything. It all came out, because I think everybody has their particular trauma response, and everyone went into whatever space they go to when when they're feeling under attack.
Yes. And so I'm just thinking about bringing it back to psychedelics. After all of this, how can psychedelics, in your opinion, be used to heal trauma of racism?
Personally, I think it's a really big thing because I've been working on this in myself and kind of like as a family for quite a while. And I think this proved to me where I was thinking that kind of like one good weekend workshop will get everybody kind of, marching along. What I actually really came to realize is the depth of the thing. It's too fanciful to think that just because these compounds have been so powerful that actually a weekend can deal with really 500 years of stuff, can deal with the epigenetic effects of racism and all of that kind of trauma. So in a way I saw, oh, the thing is even bigger than I thought. But then the good thing was it really, really forced me to do a sharp focus to the pinnacle of the thing. So really, I think now with all my rewriting, I'm really seeing kind of like you give people a lot more freedom by showing them the root, the pinnacle of the thing, and then getting them to understand how it expresses itself in all the different 10 areas of life. That gives people a bigger thing to handle, because what I'm hearing still is because people can't see the start of it, they're still kind of like talking about, and then we've got to do this in education, and then we've got to do this in the law, and then we've got, they're seeing all the tentacles and they're missing that there is a start. So now I feel like, okay, this has been a good opportunity, I think, for lots of people and myself to just really understand how we need to structure things to really, really start to make a proper and lasting impact. And like as the other panel said, the best thing I think this time, compared to 4 years ago, which was the last lot of marches because of the deaths in America, where I think definitely all the white people I knew, bar one, was still in a space of their own trauma of complete shutdown. This is the first time, also being honest, this is the first time I've ever written to all my white friends. I've never done that before. I wouldn't have dared before. I don't think I trusted any of my friendships enough to test it. But this time I did. And then the replies were really, really interesting, because it's given me a lot more information to feed into my workshops to actually see how this trauma also comes out in white populations.
Can you just like briefly say what were the answers? Like,
I think the first thing, the helplessness. White people feeling, the thing is, everybody actually feels the helplessness, but that was really interesting. The helplessness, the shame, guilt, but the guilt comes sometimes a bit under other things, but that's there after a while of digging. But the helplessness, I think, is the biggest thing. And then very close to the helplessness, I found with some people was almost going into that space of that kind of spiritual bypassing. After the helplessness, then people are forced to try and find a reason why actually it's not so big if you will change you. There's that finger pointing back. If you will change how you look at this, then I can feel a bit better, and then it's not so big. So you can see the layers of stuff. But what I found is that people with children, their children don't quite have it. And so the new generation of white children, I think there's a video that went viral, this girl challenging her parents. And that seems to be happening with all my friends with teenage children. It's their children who are talking to their white parents, kind of like going, this is unacceptable. I don't care that you say this. The world shouldn't be like this. And that's been really interesting to hear from people, that it's their children who are saying to them, why don't I learn this in school? And, why do we do this? And why is that? So this could be a start. It is a start. We're here.
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much. I really value your opinions here, because you're a wise woman. But I also, I soon want to switch back a bit more to the psychedelics and like mainstreaming of them. But before that happens, I want to ask you, Akwiya, to share your personal journey with us shortly. Like how psychedelics help you on your journey.
I mean, for me, it really was just such a saving experience with it all, because I went out looking for something. You know, it didn't just come my way, even though when I was younger I was very much a hippie at festivals, so things come your way. But to, you know, to take ecstasy at a rave is not the same as sitting down with pen and paper, having decided what you want to work on, and then take it with no music, so you don't suddenly just go off dancing. You know, it's a very, very different thing. And for me, it was really just having to deal with a kind of low-level depression that meant that I couldn't kind of just overcome things to know what to do. My mother was ill, my son was getting into trouble, I wasn't happy, I didn't want to be in the UK again, and I'd ended up here back in my mum's house. It was just kind of like too much.
This is when we met.
Yes, so when we met, I'd found Cambo, because I was looking for Iboga, but I realized that was illegal. And then I was looking for ayahuasca and I couldn't find anybody. And then I found Cambo, the frog medicine. So that was brilliant. You know, each one of these medicines, so brilliant. And then, of course, I was able to find Iboga, and I took that with somebody who's got such a brilliant protocol for a place where it's illegal, so it can be taken safely. You're microdosing for quite a long time before you actually go down and have the flood dose. And for me, all my insights till now have really been led by these medicines, just opening more and more doors. And not too long ago, I got to actually have a flood dose of magic mushrooms for the first time, because I'd microdosed them, but never. I'd actually been too scared, which now I kind of think, what, you weren't scared of Iboga, but you were scared of mushrooms. But for some reason, I was scared. But it was brilliant with the mushrooms, because that's really helped with my work. But also, it's now taken me to such a different place of understanding our world and the system, that I shared my writing with the lady who's helping me with the workshop, and she was like, okay, we're going to have to really, really backtrack, because a lot of the stuff you're now talking about is so esoteric and so metaphysical that, you know, not everybody's done mushrooms, you know, so you've got to kind of find a way to introduce these things. But for me, the compounds, the medicines, they were brought here for a reason. They are here for a reason, and the quicker more people can have access to them, I think the better, really.
I agree. And just know that if anybody wants to check, Akwiya gave a beautiful talk at Breaking Convention, and she talked more about her story. I will post a link to it at some point soon to the chat. I really recommend everybody should watch it. So that brings me to another thing, Akwiya. Psychedelic space is like mainly white space, mostly men as well, lots of men. There are women, but they're not highlighted. That's not good, is it? We need to change this. How do we change this?
Well, it's a reflection of the world. You know, it's a reflection of the world that we're in. It's no different to any other space. And so the interesting thing is that in one way, because it is psychedelics, then that's the space where these conversations can happen more. The other week, the Psychedelic Society had the talk with those two guys talking about the egoism of activism, or something like that, the ego of activism or something. And actually, I really, really, really enjoyed it. They were so awkward trying to talk about race and capitalism and how it impacts on people in the Southern Hemisphere and all of this kind of stuff. But I thought, good on you for actually doing that, because actually that's what we need. There's almost, you know, it's too easy to have kind of black and brown voices talking about these things and having just white listeners as if they don't live on planet Earth. You know, and actually what we need are more spaces with all white people really, really talking about these things. And I think XR, there were some spaces a bit like that, but I think they needed to probably lead more with that, because I do think that, if anything, psychedelics is constantly telling us it's all one thing. So if we know it's all one thing, then we need to stop pretending it's 10 different things. And we kind of need to have the guts to constantly find, stop being at the tentacles, you know, whatever the situation is. If there's too many bits to it, it means we haven't found the root. And I do think psychedelics is so good at doing that. So now, at least with everything that's happened, we can actually start having conversations and going, right, Stephen and all you other men, get you in a room, have these difficult conversations. Let's hear something come out of your mouth, you know, let's hear what you're going to do. And then, you know, we'll all help you the best way we can.
Exactly. Brilliant. Ashley, the studies, medical trials, are your participants mostly white?
They are, yeah, mostly white and mostly men. We struggle even to get women into the study. And we tried recruiting through kind of people in more diverse communities to be able to access other communities. And actually that was, it was really difficult. But I think there's a problem with it. There's also an extra problem, which is the screening. So the amount, like the screening for a clinical trial is so tight, like the criteria that people have to meet in order to fit it, that only about 5% of people who apply get it. So then if we get a tiny percentage of people from diverse communities applying, the likelihood of getting in is lower. But also we were wondering about whether, like, because, like, why are there so many more men? It's actually Akira, maybe you're right, maybe it's just a reflection of society and that kind of spread. I don't know, but we kind of thought about, because of the nature of the experience, it's almost a risk-taking experience. And would men be more likely to sign up for a risk-taking experience than women? Do they have less caring responsibility so they can take that kind of risk more? Or don't know. We're trying to work it out. And I think we need to have a lot more conversations about how, like, yeah. I mean, there's so many questions that we have, like, you know, do people of all, like, within different communities, how do people understand psychedelics? You know, like,
yeah. I mean, I think that's probably the biggest thing, because definitely in Black and Asian communities, psychedelics are definitely kind of seen as a no-no overall. But then you've got lots of people now starting to change because they're meeting more people, they go on the internet, they're hearing more stuff. But it's then, okay, where do you go? So apart from Darren Springer, there's a psychotherapist called Jill in London, and I think she's going to be a sitter when we're all allowed to leave our homes for at one of the Imperial College trials. She will be there as a person of colour. But I suppose really you'd almost have to put the feelers out to Black and brown health professionals, because they would probably be able to get it out to the communities who may be interested because they're already in therapy. But when it comes to clinical trials, I mean, the Black experience of anybody who knows history is very, very scary. You know, I think it was in the 60s or 70s, LSD was tested out on Black prisoners, giving them, I think, this guy, like 77 days solid of people being given LSD. Lord knows what happened to those people. And the Tuskegee studies, giving Black men syphilis and studying them. even like in recent years, kind of Bill Gates and the polio in India, in Africa. When I was a child, I nearly went and joined a queue in Ghana of people standing there to get vaccines. I was like 7. I didn't know what they'll do. Everybody was in the queue, and I didn't get a vaccine. But I got home, and my dad was absolutely livid, and he was looking all over my body, and he was like, "You never ever go near a white doctor with a needle again." So that then sort of feel like, oh yes, I think I can happily go along to this trial. It's a massive gap. So actually a lot of doctors and researchers kind of need to be in Black spaces talking and saying what you're doing, and the results and what you're expecting to happen, to get people to start thinking in a different way about kind of interacting with doctors in clinical trials.
Yes.
Wow. That's probably the most useful thing that I've heard. Yeah, for actual advice on how to go about it. It's really challenging, and I think it's really important that we change it. Yeah.
I'm going to soon invite Natalie back on screen, who's a psychiatrist, and she has something to say about that too. But very quickly, Akuya, I'm going to just ask, Ashley, I'm going to take you off the screen for now, but stay with us, because I will bring you back soon to talk about mainstreaming of psychedelics, our favorite subject. So Natalie, get ready. I'm trying to find you here, and in the meantime, Marta, can you talk a bit more about the participants of the retreats that you facilitate, and how is more white people? Do you have any people that are Black or brown, and how does it work?
First of all, I'm happy to be on the panel with you, Akuya, and
nice to see you again.
Yeah. And I love the perspective you're bringing to this topic, because a lot.
Marta got cut out. She'll come back. Crowdcast is not ideal.
On the intellectual level.
Marta, start again, because you got cut out. Yeah, now yes.
Oh,
start again though. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so I just want to say, I love the perspective that you just brought, because people who discuss those ideas, and they stay on the intellectual level. So that's a level that's disconnected from our bodies, and it's not universally like that, but for a lot of people, intellectual level, it's not the empathic level. People try to logically see how to resolve the situation, while the situation that's driven by trauma, it's heavily driven by emotions, and it's not necessarily a logical space. And trying to resolve it through logical means, sometimes it's re-traumatizing for the people who are victims of the situations, and it's kind of creating more pain in those people. So I love that you bring up what kind of emotions that you brought up, what kind of emotions were brought up in you with the situation with George Floyd, because a lot of people don't realize that these are the responses the Black community gets, and a lot of people are from white people, they are saying things like, oh, you need to get over your victimhood and stuff like that, and it's not that easy to get over something that's so deeply somatically ingrained in you, and it's you, it's your physicality and everything, and a lot of white people do not realize this. So I feel even maybe looking into bridging psychedelics and the situations, maybe we need preparation, we need to kind of, white people need to educate and prepare themselves how to talk about emotions to start proper conversation. And in terms of our retreat, unfortunately, we're trying to get more people of color, and not only also from minority groups, so people from LGBT But it's really difficult. I think the price is a barrier, and so we're trying to do something about this. We have a scholarship program, so we're trying to bring people from those misrepresented communities through the scholarship program. That means that we sometimes offer free spaces at our retreats, and we collaborate with Camille Barton, and we're trying to get like more people involved into like helping us to co-create that scholarship program, because that's also like for us, like majority of the people who work at on the team are like privileged white people. So for us, it's also like we don't know how to resolve it. So we're trying to get people from the community to help us to co-create this.
And this brings me to Natalie, in your comment that in order to bring more Black and brown people in, we need to have more Black and brown therapists. So comment.
Yeah, I was just saying, there was a comment here by Nana who said, I'll just read it actually for some people, because I don't think some people can see the chat, but she said, but honestly, I don't think a lot of Black people wouldn't trust a medical team of non-white people to experiment with psychedelics. What I find, especially in my job, why I think me being a Black person and a psychiatrist in the area that I work is so important is because most of, like I said before, most of our patients are Black because of the where we're based. And I think, especially if all your staff are white, or the matrons are white, the nurses are white, me just being there, and patients have said this to me, is comforting. Obviously, because of the nature of mental health services, there's a lot of mistrust anyway because of the nature of it. We take away people's liberty. And it's a very oppressive system in some ways. So if you don't see a face that is like yours, of course you're going to fear it, you're not going to engage with it. I think especially with things like trials, psychedelics aren't really part of the Black culture in general. But that doesn't mean that people can't benefit from it. But if you're going to go for you're not even going to hear about the trial, are you? If it's not in your sounding board, it's not in your social bubble, you're not going to know about it. And even if you do know about it, who's telling you, and what do you think their intentions are behind that? When you get there, there's all white people, what are you going to be thinking? It seems really simple, but I can totally understand that. I mean, just from what my patients tell me when they see me walk into the room to assess their mental health when they're having a crisis, they say that makes me feel a lot better. So it's a systemic problem, as is all of racism. Like I said in the last talk, it's woven into our society. We are living in a white world. So the air we breathe is, part of white supremacy. So you really have to look at it like that, because that's the scale we're dealing with. I think it's good if the messages and the invitations are coming from people who look like themselves, because then that trust issue is probably alleviated a bit. But it's a lot of work to do. I mean, I'm fairly new to the psychedelic community, maybe like the last year and a half. I went to Breaking Convention. I had the best time, but it was very obvious to me that I was like one of 3 Black people there. It's very obvious to me. I mean, I'm used to that. Like I said, I've grown up in Wales. I don't really find it a problem. I don't get, that sort of anxiety that some people get. But it was very obvious to me that I was, again, a minority. And it seemed really opposite to what the community stands for, which is, I felt very, it was very accepting. It was a very accepting community. I felt very relaxed. It's not somewhere where you feel like you need to go and put makeup on. But, it's a very accepting space. But I couldn't see anyone who looked like me. I saw Darren and maybe like 2 other people. So it's there. So it needs to be addressed. It needs to be spoken about. And we need to do the work. And it shouldn't be uncomfortable. I think if the gift that is psychedelics and what it can do to you, you should want to share this with everybody. And that means having maybe some uncomfortable conversations. That's what I was going to say.
Yes, that's totally right. Yes, Darren for long years has been the only one. And and then Akuya appeared in the psychedelic stage. And I must say that when I joined the Psychedelic Society, it was very wide as well, ridiculously wide. And I'm not used to it because I always had friends from everywhere around the world. So it was like, oh my God, even I feel weird here. But I must say, I've seen, so in the beginning when I saw Black people mostly, or brown people coming in, especially Black people, I say, they were really like feeling uncomfortable. They were feeling, oh God, I am totally different. I don't belong here. But I've noticed we quickly try to like kind of catch them before they leave and just engage them in conversation and just ask them about their psychedelic trips, whatever. And they would start feeling, oh, okay, there's no threat. Those white people are not that bad. And and now I must say we still have loads of work to do, but we have more and more Black and brown bodied people coming in. We have more facilitators giving talks, workshops and stuff, and this is beautiful change to see. So I really want to see more of that. I hope
Of course.
you probably all as well.
Yeah, I want to be able to like refer my patients onto these things. That would be great. You know, mental health is one of those things we haven't really got a lot in our arsenal. We haven't really come very far in terms of treatments in decades, especially for things like psychosis, especially. But you know, anything we're using the same stuff, and yes, it works for some people, but it doesn't work for everyone. So this is a really exciting branch that we're finally getting to do trials on, and I think we should be. I would love for a day for me to be like, oh, I see a patient and be like, oh yeah, well actually I think maybe you should try this and go on this retreat or try this psychedelic therapy. Like that's the dream right there.
And perhaps creating retreats, as we said in the previous panel, that address race and actually racist trauma, and they're specifically tailored to that by Black people or brown people for those Black or brown people, basically. That's
great. I would love to do that.
Yes,
that's
I would love to do that.
That's something I know Darren's really been looking into, and if we didn't have this global retreat, I think he probably would have something to announce. But it's been really good as this event has been coming forward. I've been thinking more and more about, okay, right, Acquia, time to put something together. So actually I was thinking, right, I'm seeing Darren anyway. We have to put something down on the books in the UK, in London, because there's never going to be the perfect day. You know, but at the moment we have a certain type of momentum, and I think it's like you got to chuck everything at it because not everything's going to stick.
Yeah,
totally. So I'm definitely gonna pin him down to a date, and now that I've met Natalie, gonna have to get you on board. But also at the same time, my vision is these spaces where you can have Black people doing their work and you also have white people being able to do their work, because I do think they've got the biggest amount of work to do because they really don't have the language yet. They're starting to get out bits and bobs. But I was talking to a friend of mine where I began kind of feeling a little bit high and mighty, and then we're talking, and then actually the more she's expressing herself, a white friend, I had to really kind of come back into myself because I think I was so full of my story. But then listening to her uncovering her story through the eyes of her teenage child who's putting her on the block. And I'd had a very similar situation with my teenager. He was telling me why he thought BLM was nonsense. And he was explaining to me how, you know, all these Black history books meant nothing to him because he was like, well, it never helped you lot knowing your history. Look where we are now. You know what you did in Egypt and the pyramids. What difference has it made? And teenagers are making us really have to answer some difficult questions. And in the end, she had to do with her daughter what I had to do with my son. I had to say, we're just all trying, mate. We're just all trying. We don't have the answers. And she had the same thing with her white daughters, really kind of like, Mum, Dad, you people are full of shit. I don't know why the world is like this. There's more that we can do. And it's like, yeah, we need these spaces really where we're very, very intentional, really, really, really intentional, because the work has to start on the inside first before we really know exactly what to do on the outside. There's stuff on the outside we can do, but the inside work has to come first, to the point where next time something happens, it's not going on to Facebook before we see what our white friends are thinking. They are actually able to send messages to us going, this has happened. Are you all right? Because I know now that when these things happen, they have an impact on all the Black people that I know, one way or another. You know, we've got to be able to get to that place. And also then white people can get to that place when these things happen. They are not in shame and guilt. They can understand, okay, this is happening because people with my color, but they are not me, are deciding on a world system, and we don't want this world system. Like, we've all got to get free of our baggage so we can deal with this nonsense, really.
Exactly. I would love this discussion to continue, but we have short time. So I just want to say, if you, Acquia, run anything with Darren or Natalie or all together, I will be so happy to help facilitating it from just organization point of view as society. And like always, big supporter of your work. Thank you so much both for sharing today everything. And I'm going to invite Chloe and Ashley now, because we will jump back into mainstreaming of psychedelics and the recent problems with that. But thank you so much, both of you. I love you dearly. And I will invite you on my Women in Psychedelics webinar series for Psychedelic Society to talk more about those issues. And let's make more panels and more discussions.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Bye,
Thank
ladies.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So, Chloe, I'm going to put you back on screen, and also Ashley. Hello, Chloe, you're back. And Ashley, where are you, Ashley? I got her. Right, so we're getting into one of my current favorite subjects in psychedelics. Are we ready? Are we ready for mainstreaming? Are we ready now? Because psychedelics are getting so popular. There are books published. There's a Michael Pollan book published in Saudi Arabia. That says something. So, and obviously now everybody wants interviews. Vice is constantly asking to make weird, stupid documentaries about psychedelics. And there's loads of conferences that popped out that nobody knows who are making them. And they're asking really questionable speakers to speak. What are your thoughts about? Are we ready for mainstreaming? Who wants to go first?
I mean, I've got a lot to say about this, but I don't want to hog
Go for it.
Space. I'll try and keep it.
I'll try to time you. If you're running too low, I'll show you a sign.
One of the this is a real fear of mine, and I'll try and sort of explain this as best I can. But I think there's still a lot of stigma associated with non-ordinary states of consciousness. So in the mental health system, the psychotic mental state is still stigmatized. People still feel very uncomfortable saying they've had psychosis. People still feel uncomfortable talking about it. And I often see this in my colleagues. If somebody comes into our A&E department and they describe experiencing a different reality to the mainstream reality, the doctors get very nervous. They get really quite distressed about it. They don't listen to the person. And then that person ends up sectioned. So for anyone who doesn't know what sectioning is, it's a very powerful piece of legislation where you lose your human rights very quickly, really. You get taken to a psychiatric hospital, and you can be given medication against your will, and you're held there against your will. And one of my big fears about the psychedelic mental state is that it is a non-ordinary state of consciousness. And when you're bringing it into the mainstream, I'm afraid that doctors are still going to stigmatize it, and they're still going to struggle with it. And like I say, with Ashley, with the clinical trials, when people leave the trial and they talk about it with other people who haven't experienced it, what happens then? Will people end up on a section? And I find this really frightening. And I've spoken about it to colleagues, and I've had some very strange responses from colleagues. I've been sent home from work before for my colleagues thinking I'd lost the plot. And I recognise that I'm actually in a very privileged and powerful position in society, being a doctor. And if it's difficult for people to accept it coming from me, I wonder what's going to happen to some people who come away from these experiences and they want to speak about it. And I don't know, they're labelled psychotic, they're labelled mad, they have their rights taken away, they're medicated against their will. But this could go both ways. It could be that when it gets introduced into the mainstream, non-ordinary states actually become normalized, and that could be a really positive thing. And I've since found the more I speak about it to psychiatrist colleagues, the more it is accepted. So things definitely are changing, but it is a real fear. I think the mainstream psychiatric system is a very powerful, rigid system that needs to change, and I hope this will help it to change. But there is room for an abuse of power here, and I think we really need to be vigilant that that doesn't happen. I hope that makes sense.
It makes lots of sense, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Actually, do you have anything to add? Mainstreaming of psychedelics, are we ready?
Such a big one, isn't it? Where to start? I think this is an enormous, huge topic, Anya. Yeah, I love what you're talking about there, Chloe. I think it's really important. No, I don't think we're ready. It's the short answer. I don't think we are. I think there's a huge amount to think about. Absolutely huge amount to think about, from little details to huge structures and systems being in place, and what our values as a community are, and what our values as a mental health system are, and how does this fit in? Because in a way, I guess, how do psychedelics fit into, if we just think about that's only one aspect of it, but how do psychedelics fit into a healthcare system? And I would love to see this as a treatment option for people within the NHS, because lots of people who are receiving treatment in the NHS really, really need help and can't afford to go to a retreat, for example. But if you think about how our healthcare system is, mental health is, it's very contradictory at the moment. So there's like, okay, we're going to pump funding in, but at the same time, we want more and more short-term therapies that deliver results which are easy to quantify, and so more and more short-term therapies. And are psychedelics really a short-term therapy? I think that's like another whole question to really think about, because we I think we're all on the same page here. We talk a lot about the integration, and it's this longer-term work. So psychedelics can seem to accelerate therapy, and I don't think in and of themselves, without support, they work as a therapy. I think they can go completely the other way if they're not held in the right container. They can be really dangerous. So we think a lot about like how would we use the NHS, and how do we, for example, we do all of the clinical trials on the basis of a single participant and 2 guides, and that's really not cost effective in a way. That's a really expensive treatment. So we have to think about then more models like synthesis, and it's great that synthesis is developing this kind of, and I think we should do research with synthesis, looking at the group model, because the group model is much more cost effective for, and it's probably better community wise as well in a way. So it's probably got other benefits to it. So I think that's a model that we should be thinking about more, and maybe testing more in clinical trials and moving towards that a little bit. I think one of the main issues that we're going to come up against here, and maybe like it's a very difficult one to talk about in a way, but it's that our NHS our healthcare system is based on not-for-profit. It's care given freely because that's what we believe people should have access to. But psychedelics are this kind of hybrid kind of therapy and psychopharmacological agent. So they're combined in a therapy model. So they can be licensed like an antidepressant, and that whole process is happening. And what that means for the treatment, for the therapy models, I think it's a bit frightening for me, that we're going to try and squeeze them down into as little therapy as possible to make a short enough treatment that's feasible and cost effective and, you know, meets the bottom line. And that I really worry about it, because I think if we approach them in that way, we're not asking the right question. We're not asking, how do these best work for people? And we don't know that. We're still discovering it. We're still researching right now. We're still learning so much. We've got so much to learn. And I think they have such huge potential to help people. We see, you know, even with a really imperfect therapy model on the study, big change can happen. So there's huge potential. But I think we really, really need to take seriously that we need to learn how to use them properly. And for me, I think developing not-for-profit models so that we can actually go slowly enough to learn the lessons and ask the right questions is important.
I
Totally agreed.
Agree with everything. Yeah, you said, Ashley.
Everything that's been said. Marta, do you want to chip into this?
Yeah, I loved what both of you said. They're such important points. And I think for me, the biggest worry is that the people, because there's a drive to mainstream this therapy from the government perspective, but also there's a commercial kind of like a group of commercial investors who think that this is kind of like another cannabis market or like another bubble during which like they will be able to make lots of money. And for me, that's complete misunderstanding of what those therapies are about. It's like, for me, a lot of those people do not understand like the basics of like what they misunderstand the difference between cure and treatment. Like a lot of them behave like psychedelics were a cure for mental problems like depression. So they don't see it as an ongoing treatment that needs to be personalized. And for some people, it's sometimes very lengthy, even though psychedelics seem to be very effective therapy. And there's a lot of attempts to shorten that therapy and kind of like shorten the therapy in general. It still can take years, while a lot of commercial investors, they expect that they will be able to create a model that, for example, would include like 5 sessions and that's it. And then they think that with time we'll be able to find technologies or methods that would enable them to scale up and create like clinics, commercial clinics that will bring a lot of money. So this, for me, this is the most boring part, like the commercial part, that people who invest there, people who have no idea about the mental health problems and like mental health specifics, like the kind of feel of like how to open a mental health clinic. They have backgrounds in like running cannabis growing companies or something like this, and now they want to invest. And it's a question of how tolerant the system will be, because there will be loads of failures. There will probably hear, once those clinics start to open up, we'll hear some horror stories maybe, and how tolerant the system is to this. Will government say like, okay, this whole movement is not going anywhere, we need to shut down again? Or maybe there will be other systems that will be allowed. Maybe there will be switched to more government oriented psychedelic therapy. So hopefully this, like the society and the system, the government is ready to be more tolerant. Because there will be loads of mistakes made by the commercial investors, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And maybe that can just quickly, Marta, especially in terms of the Netherlands, recently we've seen a lot of mushroom retreats, truffle retreats popping up with questionable practices. And also there was this whole like ayahuasca was kind of legal or not in the Netherlands, and now it's being tough. And I remember we had a conversation a year ago, you and me, that you were really worried because the Dutch government is starting to get like, oh, we might ban truffles now. Can you tell more about this?
Yeah, luckily in terms of truffles, actually government seems to be open to this. But yeah, with ayahuasca, what happened? There was a lot of people who were serving ayahuasca and sometimes advertising as a treatment for PTSD or depression, stuff like that. And there were some accidents that happened here in the Netherlands. 2 people died as a result of taking part in retreats. No one knows what they were taking, possibly like a combination of substances that led to like heart attack, heart failure. But the government said like, well, this cannot happen anymore. We need to regulate this. So now it's illegal to like the ayahuasca status from being like a gray area substance. Now it's just it's moved to illegal substance. And Dutch government is fairly tolerant and open. So yeah, it's a bit worrying because other governments were like in the US, for example, where people were trying to decriminalize those substances and trying to open ketamine clinics and stuff like that. If these things start to go wrong, yeah, the US government might quickly say, this is it.
Exactly, and this is a really big threat. And I want to jump back a bit to ketamine. We just mentioned ketamine clinics. There is a big trend, talking about mainstreaming, for ketamine clinics that do not give any psychotherapy. And I feel there was like, I don't know if anybody read this article, we call it Pala, which I'm going to post in the chat, and everyone should read this. There's a danger that they want to do the same with psilocybin, that it will be something you have to do every month and keep coming, because that creates the model where you have to pay for it and there's big money. Yeah. So what are your thoughts about, first of all, ketamine clinics without psychotherapy, and is that a danger for psilocybin as well?
Yeah, I mean, I've been to one of the NHS. There is an NHS ketamine clinic that doesn't have therapy alongside it. And I think a lot of the people were just addicted to it. They were just coming 2-3 times a week and having ketamine, and 20 people in a room at once. Yeah, it was quite shocking to see, really. And they wanted to even automate the pre-assessment process, so patients would type their traumas into a computer system rather than speak to someone about it.
Oh my God!
It blew my mind, actually. I thought this is, how has this happened? I don't know. You have to say, I don't know what sort of results they were getting. I think they were very modest improvements, as you'd expect, in depression scores. I've certainly also been approached by I know there's a lot of interest in industry in DMT specifically, because it has such a short mode of action. And I've had a lot of people evidently show that's great and think how much profit we can make from that. And I mean, I'm quite quick to kind of try and nip it in the bud and say you can't just get people in and jet them with DMT and kick them straight out. It's absolute madness. But I do think there are lots of people who think that's a possibility. And
oh my God, we're gonna have a nation of egomaniacs if that happens. Because sorry, but
and it's this lack of understanding. It's often people who, Martha, like you were saying, people have made a lot of money in the cannabis industry and actually don't know anything about psychedelics, but they see money to be made. And I just think, wow, you're going to really damage people if you do that. If you just get a conveyor belt of people and inject them with high doses of DMT, you're going to do some serious damage.
Yeah,
it concerns me.
God, it's good they didn't jump on their 5 Mio DMT wagon yet.
You don't even say it.
They are.
That can happen.
Yeah. There's one company that wants to mix them both together. And,
Oh my God. Interesting times. I'm way off the time, so I just want to quickly jump to Marta. What are your thoughts about ketamine clinics without psychotherapy and possibility of this happening to psychedelic space as well? I mean, to psilocybin space.
Yeah, my thoughts are semi as Chloe's. Yeah, it's mind blowing. It's like ketamine is such an addictive substance, and there's a possibility that actually, in some way, it's like a both ketamine and opioid addiction, because it does, ketamine works on opioid receptors. So yeah, like there'll be so many people now, like, yeah, getting off, feeling better, but like addicted to ketamine. And what are we gonna do? Like, what are we gonna find? Like, which substance we're gonna give them to get them out of the ketamine addiction? It's just like, yeah, it's never-ending story in some way. And yeah, there are like companies in the US already. Like, there's a company called Mindbloom that works in like semi-legal way that sends you ketamine lozenges by a post. And then you have virtual assistant, so you kind of have like a whole system where you don't meet anyone. You just get your ketamine home at home, and then you just turn on your virtual assistant. I don't understand how is that supposed to help anyone, and it's so unethical, and yeah, it's
that's awful.
So just to add. Well, yeah, I think like luckily psilocybin is different, and most people do understand that they need a guide, and it's more ketamine. It's a bit dissociating, so in some way it's easier to do on your own at home, while psilocybin can be more like stressful. So I don't think anyone would be like thinking in lines of doing virtual assistant, hopefully. So yeah, I have hope that at least like the substance, it's not very suitable for this, and no one will figure out how to like connect you to virtual reality or something like this while you're tripping on psilocybin or other similar substance.
Yes, that's my hope too. Ashley, do you want to chip into this conversation as well?
Sure, yeah.
What bothers you in all of this?
I mean, I just agree completely with all of everything that's been said so far. I don't know a lot about ketamine, to be honest, and I don't know a lot about how it works or how it works for treating depression. I suppose, like, in a very, very pragmatic sense, like antidepressants, some people like to use antidepressants, and antidepressants are designed to be used for like a short period of time and to help people kind of get, maybe to be able to engage with therapy again, or like a boost in a way, like a short-term treatment, and that they've become a very long-term treatment is really problematic, and it kind of dulls people's lives long-term and reduces their quality of life. So if ketamine could work as a very pragmatic kind of temporary, something like that's a bit better than antidepressant or something like that, then maybe. I don't know. I really don't know enough. But again, I think for me, I think the issue with all of this idea of like just having this like repeated treatment over and over, it's just this idea that mental health is medical, that you're going to give somebody something, they're going to take it, and that thing's going to make it go away. And actually, that's not, in my opinion, what constitutes mental health difficulties. It's about what's happened to people in their lives. It's about the current situation of their lives. It's about all of it, And I think it would be a tragedy in a way for any kind of, with psilocybin or with ketamine, for that to be like our sole source of what we think is how we use these medicines to treat mental health, because what they offer, I think, is an opportunity to do something completely different, to learn how, and this is what Ros Watts talks about, how to feel our pain, how to be with ourselves differently, how to develop a different relationship to life and to each other and to ourselves. And that's the great gift that these offer us for, I think for therapy and for mental health. And that's lost if we treat them like a medicine, like a pill, you know. And of course, with psilocybin, so dangerous, so dangerous. I can't like emphasize that enough. Just please, just never do that.
Thank you. We are now reaching the end. We actually ended already, but started this new quick session. I want to end with one last question. What are your worries and hopes for the psychedelic renaissance, and what you would like to see happening in the psychedelic renaissance?
I really like what Ashley, you were just saying about learning to be with your pain, and I really hope there is a shift in the way we think about suffering and our emotions, and there's a collective shift away from avoidance strategies, and I think we're terrible in our society at talking about pain and suffering. I mean, you see it all the time. You know, if someone's bereaved, they just get back to work and everyone feels awkward about it and no one talks about it. And I really hope that that's something that will come out of this, that it's okay to, you know, there is suffering. There is suffering. There's no avoiding that. There's no escaping loss. There's no escaping death. And it's okay to speak about it and to share the way you're feeling. And I hope that comes out of this.
I agree. Totally, every word. Ashley, Marta, anyone to share anything?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, I totally agree with you, Chloe. And yeah, like more vulnerability, more community work, thinking like how we can include marginalized communities, how we can involve more people and destigmatize those substances, and in some way like talking about mental health in general, and yeah, like how we can destigmatize talking about vulnerability and the fact that like majority of people are struggling. Yeah,
Totally. I think to add is like interesting. I always thought that like when I was struggling, had depression, I was thinking, oh my god, like all those people are happy and normal, and I'm so messed up in the head. And then as I started actually talking to people, I figured out everybody's messed up in the head and everybody needs therapy.
We're all suffering. The human condition is painful. Life is painful.
Just being human.
So hard.
Ashley, do you have any last thoughts to add to this?
Just that.
To the what are your hopes for the psychedelic renaissance? What you want to
I want medicine to be freely available to people. I want people to be able to access medicine that helps them, and I want us to develop treatment models that are really people-centered, you know, really developed from what people need and what works for people. And I have one other hope, which is that there's like this kind of split sometimes in the community, I think, around like the mental health legalization movement and the kind of more cognitive liberty that we have a right to our consciousness and they should be decriminalized across the board. And I really hope that these two movements can find harmony together, because I think they are both really, really important, and that together there's a strong push forward there, and that I hope that the community doesn't divide within itself, that we can stand together and support each other in all of it.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Well said.
That was a great last spot, Ashley. You just nailed it. No need to say anything anymore.
absolutely.
That was a closure. So thank you all. I appreciate you spend your time with us. It was a great discussion. I'm looking forward to hosting all of you back in my Women Psychedelic series. There's a webinar with Marta coming soon about demystifying human psychedelic experience. And so just watch Psychedelic Society for updates when that's going to happen. There's one with Chloe already we done a month ago about the pandemic, mental health, and keeping sane and conspiracy theories. So I'm going to post a link to that now. So if you guys want to check Chloe's webinar, you can do it. Chloe, can you also post your Psychiatrics link to your YouTube? And you can check Chloe's channel about mental health with Natalie, talking completely honestly about everything. And I think last thing to say is that we meet all in Anthropos in 2021 in the forest, and we dance together, and that's what I really want. Love you all. Have a great day. Have a great Anthropos afternoon. Keep dancing, remember, and stay healthy and sane.
Stay safe.